Story 1. The Neighbor Todd. A few years ago, I decided to move to a new city. In fact, the place I chose to live was in the suburbs, where the air was calmer and the surroundings much quieter than the noisy center. The house I bought wasn't large, but just enough for a person living alone. Before coming here, I didn't know anyone, and I was never the social type. I preferred silence, keeping to myself, and rarely struck up conversations with neighbors. Just a few days after moving in, a knock came at my door while I was busy unpacking. I opened it to see a man in his early 50s, tall, with black hair streaked with gray and a scruffy beard. He introduced himself as Todd, a neighbor who lived a few houses down. Todd smiled warmly, saying he just wanted to welcome me to the neighborhood. At first, I felt relieved. I replied politely, chatting for a moment. He asked the usual questions: why I moved here, where I lived before, if I lived alone. Nothing seemed strange. It was natural for a neighbor to want to know the new arrival. Todd added that he lived with his wife, Sarah, and that both of them loved the quiet life here. The short conversation ended, and Todd left, allowing me to continue unpacking. In the days that followed, I took walks around the neighborhood to get familiar with my new environment. Oddly, I rarely saw anyone. No children playing, no one sitting on porches, no one tending to their yards. The entire neighborhood felt hollow, like an abandoned town. One evening, Todd knocked again. This time, he invited me to a small gathering at his house at 7:30 p.m. He said he and his wife were hosting dinner with a few other neighbors, and that it would be the perfect chance for me to meet people. I was surprised because ever since moving in, I hadn't seen anyone outside. But I figured perhaps people just kept to themselves, and this would be a good opportunity. I agreed. At the appointed time, I walked down the dark, silent street. No porch lights, no sounds of conversation, no signs of festivity. When I reached Todd's house, it too was dark. No cars, no people. The front door was slightly ajar. I knocked, and Todd's voice called out from inside, telling me to come in and make myself at home. Inside, the house was dimly lit. I followed Todd's voice toward the kitchen, but the room was empty. No food, no table set for dinner, no signs of a gathering. The eerie silence grew heavier. My unease sharpened. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut. My heart raced. I called Todd's name, then Sarah's, but no one answered. The silence was suffocating. When I turned back, I saw the door bolted from inside with 3 locks. As I fumbled desperately with them, Todd called my name from behind. His voice was deeper now, stripped of friendliness. Heavy footsteps drew closer. In blind panic, I managed to wrench the door open and sprinted out, running straight to my house. Shaking, I dialed the police. While I waited, Todd appeared outside my window, pounding on it, pressing his face against the glass, his eyes drilling into me. By the time the police arrived, he had vanished. The investigation revealed a disturbing truth. Todd never had a wife. There was no Sarah. He had lived alone for years. Everything he told me had been lies. The dinner party never existed. His sole intention was to lure me into his home to trap me, and perhaps far worse. The police couldn't charge him. There was no concrete evidence. But I knew the danger was real. I moved out immediately. Sometimes, I still search his name online, hoping he's been arrested. I remain haunted by one thought. If I hadn't run that night, I wouldn't be alive to tell this story. Story 2. The Neighbor Standing at the Door. I once lived in a quiet neighborhood where most people had known each other for years. I had grown up in my house, and even after my parents moved away, I stayed there. Everything was stable, until one autumn when a man moved into the house across the street. At first glance, he seemed ordinary. Just another guy unloading boxes from a U-Haul truck, no different from anyone else renting a place. I wasn't nosy, so I didn't introduce myself. But within a week, his presence began to disturb me. One evening, returning home from work, I saw him standing in front of my house. He didn't knock or approach, just stood there, staring at it. When I stepped out of my car to ask what he was doing, he disappeared in a matter of seconds, as if he'd never been there. It was strange, but I shrugged it off. The next morning, while checking my mailbox, I glanced at his house. At that moment, a curtain on the second floor shifted slightly. Behind it, I glimpsed a figure watching me. My chest tightened, but I told myself maybe he had just looked outside by chance. That night, I hoped for peace, but as I looked out one last time before bed, my blood froze. He was standing at the end of my driveway, tall and motionless in the darkness. The way he stood made it clear he had been closer just moments earlier, near my door. When I stepped out to confront him, he turned and walked away, feigning a casual stroll. I called after him, but he didn't respond. The sensation of being watched haunted me all night. I finally dozed off, only to wake drenched in sweat. Something was wrong. Pressing my ear against the bedroom door, I heard the faint creak of floorboards, slow, deliberate footsteps, as if someone was moving through my house. I crouched down and peered through the gap beneath the door. My body went rigid. An eye stared back at me from the other side. My pulse thundered. He was inside. Trembling, I dialed 911, fingers clumsy with fear. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. But when they searched his house, he slipped up. He admitted he had entered mine that night. He had been stalking me long before moving in, possibly choosing that very house just to be near me. On his computer, police found repeated searches of my name. He had a history of stalking others. I was lucky to escape that night. Still, every time I recall the moment his eye met mine through the door crack, I shiver. Story 3, The Woman Across the Hall. When I moved into a small apartment in a 6-unit building, I thought I had found the perfect place. The room was modest, but sufficient, and being on the top floor, it was quiet. Across the hall lived a woman in her 40s who had shown me the unit when I signed the lease. From the first meeting, something felt off. Her hair was messy, her face lifeless, her eyes vacant. Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. Still, I assumed there'd be little reason to interact. Everyone could just mind their own business. I was wrong. The very first evening after work, around 8 p.m., I found her standing outside my door. She didn't move, her eyes locked on me. Before I could speak, she asked in a monotone, "Is this the time you usually come home?" I forced a smile, muttered something vague. She turned abruptly, disappeared into her apartment, and slammed the door. I brushed it off as eccentricity, until 2 mornings later. At 6 a.m., loud knocks rattled my door. When I opened it, she stood there, face blank but twisted into a grotesque, forced smile. "Come to my room after work," she said flatly. Without waiting, she slammed her door again, shaking the hallway. Unease grew. That night, I returned home late and was relieved not to see her. But the next morning, the knocking returned. The exact same exchange, word for word, as if she were repeating a script. This time, it didn't feel odd. It felt dangerous. On the third night, I came home to find my door unlocked. A chill ran through me. Inside, the lights were off, but the bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open and froze. She was standing by my bed, clutching a kitchen knife. Her face was hidden in shadow, but her hollow eyes glowed faintly. "What are you doing?" I stammered. She said nothing, only raised the knife slowly. In a frenzy, I lunged for the door, but it was jammed. She had tampered with the lock. Adrenaline surged. I spun back, grabbing her wrist. She didn't resist as fiercely as I expected, perhaps stunned by my reaction. I wrenched the knife away, forced her to the floor, and shakily called the police. They arrived quickly and restrained her. Only then did I notice blood on my back. She had already slashed me in the struggle. The wound wasn't deep, but the realization chilled me. It could have been fatal. Later, her family explained she had severe mental illness and had gone months without medication. They called it an episode. To me, it was pure horror. To this day, I still see her lifeless eyes in the dark, staring at me. I know one thing with certainty. Had I been 1 second slower, I wouldn't be alive to tell this story.